Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. So my name is Sameena Usman. I'm the Government Relations Coordinator for the Council on American Islamic Relations. Thank you again for coming out today. As we know, these are critical elections, and it's important that we ensure that we get out the vote and that we vote for candidates on all levels of government. So today we have candidates for the Assembly for District 16, and we also have candidates for the Pleasanton City Council. So before we get started, you may have seen on the chairs, you'll see voter guides, and those guides will show how your elected officials on the state and congressional levels had voted on issues of importance of the community, so you can see how aligned they are with some of our community's concerns. We'll also see a voter pledge to vote card, and so I urge you to please fill out those pledge to vote cards and hand it to my colleague over here who is collecting them. It basically shows how many Muslims or how many community members are planning to vote in this upcoming election. We need to show our political strength, and we need to show how many thousands or tens of thousands of Muslims are planning to vote. So it's very important for you to do that, and then you can find out some information also about the elections. Also, if you have any questions as well, we're going to be having note cards being passed around with pens as well. And so if you have any questions, please fill out the note cards, and then it'll be handed my way, and then I'll kind of go through them and try to combine some of the questions given the fact that we only have an hour. So I'm going to go ahead and stop talking so I can have the people who you came to hear talk. So I'm going to have every candidate answer or they have 2 minutes to basically give an introduction of themselves and how they have been involved with the state or the city and why they're running. So for 2 minutes, I know people can go on for hours, but and then we have our timekeeper, and so if you can please stick to the time, that would be helpful. So again, 2 minutes for the first question. So. Oh, isn't that one? And if you don't mind sharing.
Thank you. We adjust. So, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me. My name is Catharine Baker, and I'm very grateful to get to visit with you today. I represent the 16th Assembly District. I'm in my second term, so I'm a sophomore, just like my kids are in high school. I have twins at Dublin High. I've lived here in the Tri-Valley for about 17 years now and have had a great privilege of representing our community, and looking forward to the conversation today. I really want to say thank you to MCC for hosting this forum and for all the programs you've done for many years, but particularly the last 2 years, to create more understanding and conversation within our community, and been very privileged to get to be a part of those. Thank you for inviting me to the Meet Your Muslim Neighbor programs that we've been able to enjoy here in this room a couple of times and then elsewhere in the Tri-Valley. And just thank you for the collaboration. I know that I particularly think now more than ever it's important to have representatives in government who are working very hard to get past divisions and bickering and working for good policy for everyone. And that's been my style. Whether it was supporting resolutions on my very first day when I was sworn in, condemning the travel ban and the registry, and policies that I think are not embracing the right values of having a welcoming immigration policy, and welcoming others from different beliefs and backgrounds. Actually co-authored many of those measures. And also we've had a chance to stand together at local rallies, not just through a vote, but through our voice together. And then just my record. I'm very proud to have bipartisan support in our community from Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, because that's how I think you ought to get things done, and that's where you get much more work done that's better quality for our community. So I just, again, want to express gratitude for having me here today, for, again, reaching out to so many others and creating a culture of understanding, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. Oh, hi, thanks all for being here. It's so nice to be here, and thank you to CAIR for coordinating this and MCC for hosting it. I'm Rebecca Bauer-Kahan. I'm also running for the State Assembly. I am, oh, that's so cute. I'm a mom of 3. hence the love of the baby. I have a 4, 6, and 8-year-old in our public schools here in 8016. And I'm an environmental attorney and a law professor. And I'm so honored to be here today because I think that we share a rich past and present that that makes this community very special to me. My grandparents came here as Holocaust survivors in 1939 and were given the opportunity by this country at a second chance. And we, not only do we survive, which we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do, but we thrived. And so I really have grown up knowing firsthand both the fabric that makes this country great and also what it means to live the American dream. And so in the wake of the 2016 elections, I decided that I couldn't sit on the sidelines as our values were under attack. And so I actually met Sameena at the airport in the wake of the Muslim ban because I stepped up and I coordinated the legal response, ensuring that everyone that day had representation and that those people who were landing in the exact circumstances that my family had come here years earlier were given representation, were sent off into our community to seek refuge and a second chance, just like my family did. And so it was an honor to stand with your community members and make sure that they have the same opportunities that my family was given. And now I'm running for the assembly, so I can continue to represent our values in Sacramento, make sure that we have the strength of conviction of what this makes this country great and what we believe, and also to deliver for this district on the things that make this community so special. Our education system, making sure we have strong public schools, transportation, the things that really make our community great and that made us all move here, and we need to continue to make it strong. Thank you.
Well, thank you to MCC for hosting this. This is the second or third time I've been here. My husband and I have attended the Meet a Muslim, which we found extremely informative and beneficial to the community, and so glad that you do that. My name is Kathy Narum, and I am been your city councilwoman for 5+ years. My family and I have lived here for 23 years, over 23 years, raised our 2 daughters who have graduated and are now off the Narum family dole, which I'm very proud of. And some of you probably can relate. Thank you. I've served on the Park and Rec Commission and the Planning Commission prior to being elected to the City Council. It's really been an honor to represent the people of, and the residents of Pleasanton on the City Council. During my last term, we've accomplished a lot, including we've opened 3 new parks, we've established a plan to reduce our unfunded pension liability, we've lowered the garbage rates, and we've been increasing the diversity on our commissions to ensure that they reflect the community we represent. This is really a wonderful community, but there's always more that we can do to improve it. In the next 4 years, I will focus on maintaining and improving our quality of life, ensuring that we remain financially secure, and making improvements to our overall environmental stewardship. How do I accomplish this? By continuing to listen to you, the residents of our city, and capitalizing on my years of civic service here in Pleasanton. I'm here to share my ideas that I hope will give you a better idea about what I'm about and how I'll continue to work hard for you to maintain our small town feel, our quality of life for you, your family, for the years to come. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you all for welcoming us here. I have been here once before, and it's a wonderful opportunity to connect and understand your community better. Since I was here last, I've had the opportunity to have several conversations with other community members who have also come and to outreach invitations here, and I think that that's a real important part of the community to make that connection, that outreach. Preserving Pleasanton's small-town character has motivated my 30+ years of community involvement. I've served vulnerable populations in our community, first by being on the Pleasanton Human Service Commission for 11 years, also serving students at Las Positas College as a student advisor. I've worked on several nonprofits in Pleasanton, REACH, which is a nonprofit that provides affordable housing for developmentally disabled adults, and NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. I have participated on numerous budgets and planning committees and task forces for the City of Pleasanton and the Pleasanton Unified School District, including the Citizens Committee on Debt Management, which was an important one. I have a lengthy and diverse record of service to Pleasanton, and I am ready to apply these experiences to serving the Pleasanton City Council. I'm a small business owner with my husband, Nick, of 30 years. We have lived in Pleasanton and raised our 3 children here, who attended Pleasanton schools, then graduated from California universities. I will stand for residents, not special interests. Thank you.
Hello, salam alaikum. Thank you so much for welcoming us today. This is a wonderful opportunity. My name is Joe Streng. I'm running for Pleasanton City Council. And I'm running because Pleasanton's been my hometown for nearly 40 years. I graduated from Amador Valley High School, go Dons. My wife, I'll say a couple, okay. My wife also graduated from Amador. And we moved back to Pleasanton permanently in 2005. And we moved back because we knew that this was the place where we wanted to be. Pleasanton is in my blood, and that's why I'm running for City Council. A lot, of course, has changed over the last 40 years, but I believe that the core of Pleasanton has really remained the same. And that's pretty remarkable when you can grow a community from 30,000 to 80,000 people and still maintain those strong, thriving neighborhoods, that wonderful downtown, a strong business environment. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because you have city leaders and staff members who are looking ahead to the future, and they're making decisions for future residents. And that's what I want to be a part of. That's also why I'm running for City Council. I served on the Park and Rec Commission for 9 years, and I was also on the Bike, Pedestrian, and Trails Commission for a few years before that. And during my time, I was able to deliver a lot of great amenities to the city. I don't know if you all are dog owners, but Cubby's Dog Park was one of the programs, one of the projects that we delivered. We expanded the tennis center. We delivered 3 neighborhood parks, and we opened up Bernal Phase 2. So I have a lot of experience delivering things to the city, great amenities to the city. I'm endorsed currently by 4 of the 5 current City Council members. I was also endorsed by the Pleasanton Weekly and the East Bay Times, and I'd appreciate your support as well. Thank you again so much for having us.
So assalamu alaikum. I'd like to thank CAIR as well as the MCC community for having us here in Pleasanton and for inviting myself and the other candidates here today, as well as for coming out and spending time with us. I'm excited to get to know the MCC community even better than I currently do. So my name is Joseph Ledoux. I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I'm a police officer by trade. I've been a police officer for the last 12 years. Prior to that, I was a police dispatcher, and before that, a reserve firefighter in Orange County. I've spent nearly half of my life in public safety. I have my master's degree in criminal justice and my undergrad in international business, and I think that that's going to be useful as we go forward, and I'll explain that here in a second. My pillars of my campaign, first and foremost, strengthen our public safety. We've seen an increase in crime in Pleasanton. That crime is consistent through the region. However, there's something that we can do to address that. Next, I support mindful growth, growth that is consistent with our critical infrastructure. I'll also advocate for our schools. I think there's more that we can do as a city council to strengthen our relationship within our school board and our school district. And lastly, maintain our small town charm. That is why many of us have either moved here or that we have stayed here, is because that we love and thrive the small town charm that Pleasanton brings to our community. I'm excited about bringing inclusiveness to the Muslim community within the Pleasanton Council if elected. And as I mentioned earlier, I think one of the unique perspectives that I bring is the public safety perspective that is currently underrepresented on our city council. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I know, a few of you have already answered this in your introductions, but I'd like to go a little bit more in depth as to what are your top 3 priorities if you were to be elected, and what are the top 3 things that you'd like to change as well, like what issues that you do see and problems that you see. They might be the same thing as the top 3 priorities you have.
1 minute. I'll tell you as much as I can in 1 minute. So my top 3 priorities, number 1, I would say education. I'm a product of the Bay Area Public Schools. My kids are in our public schools. I think it is a travesty that we are the 5th largest economy in the world and the 46th in the country in per pupil funding. We need to be doing better to prepare our kids for the 21st century jobs that they face. So making sure that we really put our budget where our values are and fund education better. Second, I'm an environmental attorney. I have 3 young children that are inheriting this planet, and climate change is a huge issue for me. So making sure that we have strong leadership on climate change. California is a leader in the nation on the environment, but we could be doing more. And we see in Sacramento that there's a lot of times when the special interests are winning and our future isn't. And I want to change that and make sure that we're fighting climate change with everything we've got. And then my third is transportation. That relates back to my love of the environment because public transportation is important to that, but it's also a quality of life issue. You know, we are in the middle of getting from the valley to the jobs, and so we see it every day on our roads, and we need to make sure we're funding infrastructure, getting people around, making sure they're home with their family and not sitting in traffic. I'm going to pass it to you. Oh, pass it.
Thank you. So my 3 priorities would be downtown, continuing to make it more vibrant, including looking at moving or building a new library / community center over on our Grinnell property so that we can, thank you, in the back, reimagine our downtown at the south end. I'm sure most of you have at some time walked downtown, and it's really the heart and soul of our community, and we can do better. We need to do more there, and lots of ideas. I'm currently on the Downtown Specific Plan Update Committee. Secondly, we need to continue to work to upgrade our infrastructure. We had to have a spike in building due to the lawsuit from the housing, and we did not have a chance to continue to improve the infrastructure in conjunction with that building. So we're playing a little bit of a catch-up mode, and that would include our roads, our schools, and even though the city doesn't manage this or run the schools, we still have a role to play in that, and we need to continue on that. And my third thing would be public safety. The most important role of the local government is public safety. If you don't feel safe, it doesn't matter how many parks and trails and whatever we have, because you're not going to use them. And so we need to continue to really pay attention to that. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. My top 3 priorities are I support slow, smart growth. So slow it down and be strategic in what we are required to build. At the same time, improving our infrastructure, schools, water, traffic. We've built thousands of housing units over the last 18 years, but we haven't built a school since 2001. So we're falling behind on our infrastructure. All of our schools, elementary, middle, and high school, are all above capacity. Fiscal responsibility would be one of my priorities, and standing up to state overreach. There are state legislation that is really impacting our ability to keep balance within our community. Pleasanton is as lovely as it is because we've really worked to keep things in balance. And with the legislation that is mandates that are being forced on us, it threatens our ability to keep that going. Last comment, as far as top priorities, the 2017 City of Pleasanton survey identified citizen priorities. The top concern is overgrowth and the negative impacts. So I support the priorities that the city residents support.
Thank you. 3 priorities. First and foremost, fiscal responsibility and making sure that we can meet our unfunded pension liabilities. I say fiscal responsibility first because, quite frankly, you can't do anything in Pleasanton unless you have the money to do it. So I would say that let's make sure that we're planning for the future and making sure that we can pay our unfunded pension liability. Second is safety and infrastructure. Those would be the things that I would want to spend the money on. We certainly need to make sure that Pleasanton remains one of the safest communities in the Bay Area. And we also need to make sure that our infrastructure is meeting both the current and the future needs of our residents. And then the third priority for me is quality of life, and that can capture lots of different things. That could include our parks, it could include all the wonderful services that we offer in the community. In terms of the two main issues that we face, development is certainly a top priority, is something that we need to be really thoughtful and careful about. So we need to be very mindful of the approach that we're taking to meet our housing needs. And then traffic as well. I hear that a lot when I talk to residents. What are you going to do about traffic?
So when we talk about top 3 priorities, I mentioned some of these earlier. First is public safety, and namely crime, as I mentioned. 28% increase over the past 6 years in Part 1 crimes. That's our violent crimes. We need to address that. We can leverage technology as well as focus on constitutional policing in our community. Next is supporting mindful growth with an emphasis on our critical infrastructure, that we focus on our schools and making sure that our fire department can respond as quickly as we want them to respond in the event that we need them. And lastly is advocating for our schools. We all in this room share an immense value that we place upon our education, and we need to make sure from a city council perspective that we focus and that we collaborate with our school districts so that we can have the best schools in the region.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think I would like to continue to focus on the areas that most affect the quality of life for all of our families, regardless of what political background you might have. And it does start with education. Certainly the funding for our education system, I've been proud to support a 17% increase in funding to our local schools in California through my work across the aisle, and also to co-author legislation to modernize and reform the funding formula that determines how much money our schools get. And I was very grateful to be awarded Legislator of the Year from the California School Boards Association, which represents 1,000 school districts in the state of California, for the work I've done successfully protecting and fighting for our school budgets. Secondly is certainly transportation. The Assembly District is defined by transportation hubs and BART parking lots that are full by 7:30 in the morning. Very proud that just last week, because of my work across the aisle, I was able to break ground on a new parking structure in the Tri-Valley area that will bring more parking spaces so people can get out of their cars that are emitting greenhouse gases and be able to take BART. And also have seen great progress in connecting the BART system to our ACE train from the Central Valley. I authored the legislation that made it possible to connect those two systems, taking 30 to 40,000 cars a day off of 580 and 680. This is through bipartisan work that focuses on results. And finally, the financial health of the state, but I see the stop sign is already up before me. So those are a couple of areas that I feel very strongly about. Thank you.
So this would be a question for the candidates for City Council. So housing is out of reach for many residents, given the rising prices of housing and also the rental costs. So as a council member, what would be your role on the council on addressing these rising costs? And I'm going to throw in one more. I know it's only 1 minute, but in terms of like the Costa-Hawkins repeal for Prop 10, what is your position on that? So.
Thank you. I do not support Prop 10 here in Pleasanton. We have not had rent control, and particularly with all the apartments and things that we've built. I think we're right now in a situation where supply and demand, and not hearing the need necessarily for rent control at this time. In terms of the housing, I wish we all had the magic answer to that. My opinion, my sense is that as we look at the east side for planning, I'd like to see us build, or not build, but zone for some houses in the 1,000 to 1,200, 1,500 square feet that are truly affordable by design. In Pleasanton, we really have no entry-level housing, such as what you and I might have known. When my first house was 750 square feet, and it was just fine to get started. And we need to add some of that here. We've been addressing the apartments. And that with what we've built over the last several years as part of our state mandates, including 20% of them have been affordable. So we have been able to increase some affordability. We also are just finishing the Cottinger Gardens, which is more than doubling senior housing at the affordable and very low rates, and so that's a huge plus, I think, for the city, and I've got a stop sign too, so that's...
One thing I feel good about is while Pleasanton doesn't have traditional rent control, we do have a form of rent control for our vulnerable populations with our income eligibility restricted units. There is rent control for our populations on fixed incomes, our senior housing, our developmentally disabled, because it continues to be based on income. And if they're on a fixed income, then the increases are very limited. The reason that we're able to do that is because those are properties that there is some governmental control over. The reality is on property that is market rate driven, we don't have that ability. So I don't support Prop 10. I don't think that it really fits. I don't think that there is a support in Pleasanton for rent control. But again, I'm glad that we have the ability to provide some security for our more vulnerable populations. I also think that we need to be strategic in our state mandates that we will continue to have and build smaller properties so that they are more affordable, more available.
Thank you. I voted against Proposition 10. I do think it is well-intentioned, but I think in the long run it might actually decrease and hurt our housing supply and our availability of housing. I believe that Pleasanton needs to diversify our housing inventory. We just need to provide more options for people. The fact of the matter is not everybody wants a 3-bed, 2-bath house with a front yard and a backyard these days, right? Some folks want, some housing that is closer to transit-oriented housing options. Some people like side-by-side options. And right now we simply don't have that diversified housing supply that we need in Pleasanton. Obviously, we also need to work to make sure that we're meeting our mandates, our RENA requirements. I don't think that we should be waiting until those new numbers come out in 2022 or 23. We need to start planning now to meet those requirements. And that includes restarting the planning on the east side, because I think that provides a tremendous opportunity for us to meet those requirements, and then also perhaps spread the availability of those requirements throughout the city.
So I too do not support Prop 10. I think most of the reasons have been previously mentioned. As we look forward to our city and our housing plan, I think that we should remember we voted to protect our ridge lines, and so with that we have to get a little more creative in what land we have left to build. And as we go forward, we know that the planning process from implementation to breaking ground is certainly more than 18 months. So I think that we should start looking forward to planning the east side. That's an opportunity. Now, when I say that planning, that we need to make sure that our critical infrastructure is in place, some of the things I mentioned previously, that our fire can get there, our schools. So simply at this point, we just need to plan and make sure that it fits our community. But I think that we should get involved in that rather than letting it go to the county and be piecemeal together. So that's one place that we can look for an opportunity. I certainly support affordable housing by design. I think there's an opportunity for us to look at having a diversified housing plan that meets everyone's needs. Not everybody needs the 3,000 plus square foot home as an entry-level home, and nor can we all afford that because it's pretty pricey. So certainly having a diversified housing plan in our community would be a benefit for all of us as well. And lastly, as I mentioned previously, that we look forward to this planning, that when we go forward to our 2022 RENA numbers, that we don't just look exclusively to the east side, that we look throughout the city. And I got the stop sign, so thank you.
I don't know, would the candidates for assembly, would
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And on Proposition 10, I do not support Proposition 10. It is an area of different policy positions that we have on this issue. I tend to agree with the San Francisco Chronicle on this issue, that it actually will make housing supply less, which makes it more costly, and also will reduce the quality of housing, particularly for those who are most struggling to meet housing needs. And so I think it'll actually do more harm for our area than good, and so I do not support Prop 10. And then the housing generally, the state absolutely plays a role. I think the state has actually imposed enough restrictions and guidelines on local housing. What the state needs to focus on is its own state statutes that are causing housing to be more expensive and take longer to build. I've co-authored the legislation that allows us to do that. It's an important area for people to be fighting for because the state has to look to its own issues, how it's contributing to it. Secondly, I've also been very strong supporter of another measure that's on your ballot. That's the housing bond. I was actually one of the members who was one of the deciding votes to make sure the housing bond came before you. This is to help the state in partnership with our local communities and nonprofits build workforce housing as well as affordable housing in every single local community. And finally, I co-authored the legislation, again, bipartisan legislation, to make sure that we help people who are first-time home buyers begin to save for that first down payment. If you know about 529 savings plans for college, it was to set up a similar program for those who are making their first-time down payment, because 72% of renters in California have a problem just making that down payment, and so I'm proud of that legislation as well. Again, all bipartisan. It gets the job done. Oh, stop sign. Thank you.
Yes, so we do. I'm a big believer in local control when it comes to building and housing. We heard a little bit from your city council candidates about state overreach, and I think that housing is somewhere where communities know best where to build, how to build, and what needs need to be met to do that smart growth. And so Prop 10 puts that back to the cities. And as I think we've heard from your candidates, it's not the right thing for Pleasanton to have rent control, but I think each city should be making that own decision for themselves. What is best? Do we need building? Do we need rent control? And that is a decision that I think should go back to the cities. So I do disagree on that. I guess I'm standing out on this panel. And on housing, yes, we need more. And I think it's a couple things. One is, again, supporting these measures from the state that allow, we agree on Prop 1 and Prop 2, that those are important measures that need to put housing forward for people in our community, and also seeing what the state is doing to prevent housing. I worked on bringing affordable housing into my community, and I saw regulations that were stopping us from achieving more affordable housing because we were this much too far from public transit or something like that. And it's looking at those measures and making sure we're allowing housing to be built where cities and communities can and want to build it so that we have more housing. Wait for instructions.
I'll use this one. Okay. I've gotten a couple questions about traffic. I know a few of you had already mentioned it, but I think if you can go into more in depth about how would we mitigate traffic. And I guess I know as a city council member, you wouldn't be able to control the 580, 680 corridor, but in some ways, what alternative solutions do you have in order to mitigate traffic? So if you could actually start. If you could just do like a very short.
They are building the 84, right? So I was talking to a California person, they were supervisors. Why you guys doing all of this work there? You're creating a lot of traffic, a lot of heavy traffic. Since there's a lot of traffic that wants to go to San Jose, and they could be a fingertip from 5, that 5 bypass, all the way to San Jose. It's a lot of traffic that actually comes through this area. They are not coming there, but it makes life very difficult for folks like us who live here and go to the valley. So I know you're all very local. I wish Swallow was here and talk to the people, but that's one thing. Traffic in general is bad, but that was one thing that what things that
You want to give this to the
Well, but I think there's local traffic issues as well. Like how would you? So I guess it would apply to all. Each of you would have a different way of tackling traffic, and so on a city council level, you'd be in a different level versus state level. So if you can go ahead and start.
Okay, and exactly. So much of the traffic is regional, and we need to work with our state legislative representatives on it. There's little that we can do on the regional, although we are pleased that it looks like 84 is now funded and will be completed soon, and that should give some relief. There are other traffic suggestions like El Charro, that I'm concerned that if El Charro comes through, it's designed to be a regional solution, but could have negative impacts on cut through in our local streets. So I'm very concerned about that, not sure that I would support that. I think we're so vulnerable at the crossroads of the two freeways to cut through traffic. That's got so much impact on us. So I would look critically at all regional solutions and consider how it's going to affect us.
I'll defer to our state legislators on some of the questions that have been raised here so far, and I'll certainly agree that we need to partner with our regional partners to make sure that we're providing long-term solutions. In terms of Pleasanton itself, I'm pretty passionate about this because I was on the Bike, Pedestrian, and Trails Commission. So I worked really hard to make sure that our streets are safe and they're working better for everybody. If you're familiar with Pleasanton, you might see some green bike lanes, for example. I mean, those are some measures that we implemented to make sure that our streets are safe, but every time you see someone on a bike, it means that that person's not in a car. So I would actually want to make sure that we're continuing to explore those possibilities. There are also some specific streets that I would want to address as well. West Las Positas is a major artery right outside here. It goes to Hart Middle School, goes to Fairlands, right in my neighborhood. Let's make sure that we're making that street safe, because if a kid can ride a bike to school and a parent doesn't have to drop that child off, and that cuts down on traffic around the schools. So there's one area that I would love to see us do a lot better.
So, sir, as you mentioned, you're bringing up the cut-through traffic, and that's one of the consequences of us being on the crosshairs of two major interstates. But Highway 84 will eventually provide an expressway, so hopefully that'll give us some alleviation of our traffic internally. I think with my public safety perspective, my background in policing, I can certainly respect the value that we put on having safe streets. I have a 5-month-old in the back of the room here, so I certainly want to make sure that we don't have people trying to race through our community to get to Silicon Valley just to save a few minutes rather than spend some time on 580, 680 corridor. So going forward, there's certainly things that we can work on. I don't know if you're familiar, but right now the City Council has a plan to use Johnson Drive next to BART and leverage technology to do the cycling of lights. That technology will also work with the freeway so that when we have accidents on the freeway and we can anticipate the increased traffic flow to our city streets, those lights will change their frequency. And so that, if it's proven successful, can certainly be rolled out and expanded throughout our community to help alleviate some of that traffic. And we're never going to see the traffic go away being on the crossroads of two interstates, but certainly we can leverage technology, and keeping in mind our public safety and that background that I bring, looking forward into finding a resolution for this.
You can say, this one works. All right, here we go. Okay. Thank you for the question. And I serve on the Transportation Committee precisely because it has such an impact on the quality of life in our area. On Highway 84, it really is essential that the widening continue and it be throughout that entire corridor, because it is almost a bypass from the Central Valley and eastern part of our county down to Silicon Valley, and completely committed to that project. And I think you'll see unified support in the community for it. It really is an important one. But I really want to underscore also the 580, the role that 580 plays in our lives, and how important connecting BART to the commuter train called ACE from the Central Valley is to our area. By connecting those two systems, we will take 30 to 40,000 cars, as I mentioned earlier, off of 580 and 680 every single commute day. And I was proud again to author that legislation after the project bogged down literally for decades. And I've only been there for 3 years, but there was enough support and laser focus on it to get that done. The impact of that is not just on 580. It's also on our parallel side streets and our city streets that Waze is telling people, that app is telling people to go to in order to bypass traffic on Interstate 580. So there's a mutual benefit there, and the Innovation Tri-Valley and Bay Area Council found that that project is going to be life-changing in the Tri-Valley area, so that'll continue to be a focus. And finally, it's looking at the Port of Oakland. All of the traffic and trade goods movement comes through the Port of Oakland, connecting our area to Interstate 5 on 580. It's getting that to 24-hour work, and the sign's up. So I'm happy to visit with you more about the details of how we can work that.
These are complicated issues for 1 minute. Yes, so one of the, I think, important things you bring up are these local infrastructure projects that we're working on. And one difference between the two of us is our position on Prop 6 and SB 1. And, you know, I think it is so crucial that we continue to provide those funds both for these projects that we're seeing on our interstates, but also to our cities, right? A lot of what you hear them talk about, you know, pedestrian safety comes directly from that money that if Prop 6 passes will be cut off. And so we need to make sure we're supporting infrastructure, doing it in a way that makes sense, and doing it in a way that provides accountability, but that allows us these projects that are so important to our community and will really change the way our communities move around. And that includes these projects you're talking about. The Valley Link is something I support. I'm a huge believer in clean public transportation. We need to increase that. It does get people off our roads, which gets people moving around. And given sort of where we sit in the Bay Area, it is crucial that we're providing as many alternate means to transportation, but also fixing the roads and the systems around us at the same time.
Yes, that's okay. Well, sit as the alternate to the Alameda County Transportation Commission, and regionally that commission has brought the high occupancy vehicle lanes on 580, and we are now doing those on 680 northbound, which will help keep people on the freeway and not on the Pleasanton roads. Highway 84 completion is probably the top priority of this current council, to get the cut-through traffic off of Burnell and First Street and get them on their way over to Livermore and beyond. And also the BART, extending some kind of light rail beyond our East Pleasanton station, and not having all these people driving in on our roads to get to BART. Locally, this council has just approved spending for 2 different sets of software for stoplights. One of them will help them do the timing of the lights. The second one is a trial of the on-demand lights based on the traffic, which I'm really excited about because I think it has a lot of applications potentially at schools. And the third thing that we are absolutely working on is creating bike lanes and safe, making them feel safe as we do our road maintenance and so forth. Thanks.
So a few of the candidates had mentioned about you know, safety, you know, making sure that our city is safe and that yeah. So, but one of the concerns, and I think actually it could apply to all of the candidates. So recently there was a bill, AB 3131, which had to do with militarization of our police, and that we've seen a lot of city police departments acquire military technology and using it with the idea that they want to keep our community safe. So how do we ensure that we keep our community safe without militarizing our police and without also using tactics such as surveillance in order to surveil communities? We've seen, I know I'm going off a long tangent, but we have seen that against the Muslim community, especially like the most famous case has to do with the NYPD spying on the Muslim community, and there's been a big outrage and lawsuit, and it didn't do anything to keep the community safe at all. So, to reiterate, how do we ensure to keep our cities safe without militarizing our police departments, and also how do we make sure that we protect the privacy of our community members? So, and I think you have it's you. I'm sorry, Joe. I think you're the first.
I'll go as I sit next to the police officer. Listen, you know, the city of Pleasanton does a fantastic job keeping our community safe, and they use a community policing model, which I think works extremely well for our community. I certainly would not support any new measures that would increase surveillance or, as it's been described, militarizing our police. I think that the police style that we have right now for Pleasanton works extremely well. And let's be honest, people move to Pleasanton for 2 reasons. First is our schools, and the second is for safety. So I believe that our current policing model works very well. I continue to support our police, and I'll also certainly work to make sure that we continue to make sure that our police is fully resourced, and that goes for fire as well.
Thank you. So I certainly have a background here, so I can talk to you about this. When we talk about policing in Pleasanton, as I previously mentioned, I would support and encourage Chief Spiller to promote and and they do, but constitutional policing, that is to police on crime, not that we police for targeted reasons. And I think there's a value in that because in this community's increase in its diversification over the last decades, and so we need to ensure that our police department evolves in that. And secondly is to ensure that every officer has training in implicit bias, because although it's easy to find explicit bias, implicit bias isn't. And the number one way to overcome implicit bias is through education, and education alone is the single-handed most effective tool in that. And so to ensure Chief Spiller works with his staff to ensure that all officers have training in implicit bias. As we talk about surveillance, I think that it's important that we keep, in the last decade, at least in my experience in law enforcement, we put stricter guidelines on it. That in order to do surveillance technology, you need to get a court order from a judge or more often a search warrant. And we need to ensure that happens. Now, those rules change as we get to the federal level, and that's a little outside the scope of today's conversation. But certainly for the Pleasanton Police Department, as we look forward for any kind of surveillance, that they're getting authorization from a judge. That is to prove that they have some reason and that it's not being done without some sort of criminal nexus. And so I would support those, and that's the stop. I could go on. If you have more questions, ask me afterwards.
I'll actually be the runner. I need to get my steps in. No, and I was told that we have to use this microphone because they are apparently live streaming this. So, and I think that this only works with the live stream. So.
No, it's a great question. I mean, safety is obviously an issue that is important to all of us. I mean, as parents and people who live in this community, we want to make sure we're safe and our communities are safe. But at the same time, we have to balance that with the values that this country holds and that it's founded on. And so making sure that we have police forces who are working within our communities, who know our communities, who are in partnership with our communities in keeping us safe, rather than using means that separate them from the community as those that you mentioned. And so one of those things is, surveillance and racial profiling. Some of the surveillance you mentioned has been done on the basis of racial profiling, and that is never acceptable in this country. It's unconstitutional, it's wrong, and we as a state need to be doing everything we can to stand up against that and say that's not who we are, those aren't our values, that isn't the law, and we will not allow it. And so, ensuring that the Constitution is followed, that we're not crossing those lines, the court orders are mandated, and that our police are working, again, in partnership with us to keep us safe, but not in any way that targets a community or separates the community in any way, because that isn't the nation that we want to live in.
Thank you. And I think it's important, first on the issue of militarizing, because that is sometimes a subject of debate in Sacramento. And the value that, just because I think you deserve real specifics, I think the value that I really try to work on is making sure that it is the local community that gets to decide that. So if your sheriff is elected, that gets to remain in your local community and not someone from Sacramento telling you what you can or cannot do. And that sheriff, whether the sheriff represents an entire county that has a large city or all rural or semi-rural, it's very important that we allow our local communities to do that, because you can elect that person. And it's a lot easier to be able to go to that sheriff or that county board of supervisors and talk about what is good policy for your community, instead of going to Sacramento and trying to talk to someone from Los Angeles about what should happen in Pleasanton. So I think that's a very important ethic to have, and one that I've supported in the way I've voted. Secondly, on the issue of surveillance, it's really important to have transparency of our police departments. And I've been proud to support the efforts to make sure that, for example, the body cameras are going to be released to the public if there have been any use of force issue or an officer-involved shooting, and the same with the records that come from those investigations. Transparency is very important for what happens in this area, and it ensures that we're protecting our community and due process.
Thank you. So our police uses community policing, as we've talked about, but at the same time, they have to be prepared for active shooting at the mall, which, I mean, let's be honest, it could happen tomorrow, as well as active shooting at our schools. We've got, what, 14 schools. I mean, as a mom, I want to know that our police are trained in that. In the meantime, we have just outfitted all of our officers with the latest in body camera technology, and it's come in handy for some of the incidences, as well as when we get police complaints, the first thing we do is look at the body cameras and find out that often the complaint is not justified. One of the other things that we're doing is we are trying to make our police force look like our community. I think this is really important that we have both men, women, and a variety of ethnicities who are out policing. And finally, many of you may not know, but our police can receive extra pay if they pass a proficiency test in certain languages that, again, are reflective of are used in our community. And I think this is something that's really a plus. And we have a number of officers, that have done that, have taken that on and gotten that proficiency.
Only 3% of the community reports concerns about safety in Pleasanton. For the most part, our community feels very safe. I have been outspoken about militarization of our police department and all community police departments. We have a tank. Pleasanton doesn't need a tank. The tank should have been, I asked for the tank to be returned because we have a tank and other federal equipment because federal grants are made available. We got a tank for free, so why not get a tank? Our police departments have hundreds of hours a year of assault training and very little of crisis response and de-escalation training. It has been a big issue. I've been one of the few people in our community. I think it's wrong to not acknowledge that we've had multiple officer-involved shootings. And it's because if we have a heightened training of assault and escalation instead of de-escalation, the muscle memory when a crisis happens does not serve our vulnerable populations well. And it's something that I've been very vocal on for quite a few years, and I will say I do believe things have gotten better, but we still have a tank.
Yeah, of course we have to share that one. I'm just gonna use this one. For mine, I guess I can use this. Hello. So we've seen the push for a lot of cities to become sanctuary cities so that city resources would not be used to assist with ICE in detaining folks who are undocumented. So what is your position on whether or not Pleasanton would want to become a sanctuary city, and how would we work to protect those who are undocumented? And I know the same question can go to the state representatives as well regarding SB 54.
So I think when we talk about this, it sounds like it's on, we should be looking forward to a partnership with our state. If we try to tackle this issue individually in every city, what we'll end up with is a piecemeal solution that isn't going to probably work for our whole state. We need to come up with a solution regionally that we can work on this. I certainly support helping getting people in our community, especially when we look at refugees. And I'll share one example of this that I value highly, which is in this past week at work we had, well, he got hired back in May, but a refugee who came from the Trinidad and Tobago, who came here, immigrated into New York, and is now a police officer where I work, which is in Berkeley. He's a friend now. In fact, he was just at my house this past weekend. But I have a tremendous value in what he's brought to our department, which is this diversification. And I support diversification because it's wonderful for everything. It's wonderful for our community. It's wonderful for our police department. And that's part of what I think that I bring to our council is the diversification in my view. And so I think that when we look at this, that we should be looking at it from a regional or a state perspective so that we don't get a piecemeal project where Pleasanton supports it, but perhaps our neighbors don't, and we don't have this, this collaboration.
Thank you, and I'll speak to the sanctuary state issue. And just my starting principle is a very welcoming immigration policy is an American value. It makes our country better. It is something we should fight for across party lines, and it is very important to our country. And I say that as the granddaughter of an immigrant also who came through Ellis Island at a time when Italians were considered subhuman. And so that's what my voting record has reflected. I strongly support that policy, not only for those coming from countries that don't have strife, but including those who are refugees, and have been very outspoken about that. And I've voted for the legislation that prohibits ICE from being able to round up folks in the home in rental buildings or in home settings, in workplace settings, or in education settings. Because I think it's not only against our American values, but it's very much against a good use of public safety dollars to go rounding innocent people up. I did not support SB 54, the sanctuary state status, because I do believe that we need to make sure that we don't have hoops that law enforcement have to jump through in order to get folks who have committed crime here and victimized other people here. And SB 54 did that, also in a way that made it impossible for law enforcement to speak to each other about those who shoot peace officers or violate domestic violence restraining orders. So I did not feel that that was an appropriate way to go, to set up those hoops for law enforcement to be able to work together for folks who are victimizing others in our community. And I think it's important, if you victimize someone, that you need to be off our streets.
So, you know, you heard a little bit about my background, but I feel very, very strongly that the zero tolerance policies that are coming out of Washington right now don't reflect the values of our nation, the values of our state, or the values of our community. And we'll do everything in my power at the state level to fight them. And I think SB 54 was an incredible tool in that, saying that our state resources cannot be used in Donald Trump's policies. And so when children were separated at our borders, our state resources weren't used, and I was saddened when my representative voted against it, I'll be honest. It's a strong value of mine, and I would have supported it. And I think that not only is it our shared values, is it what this district stands for, it makes us safer. When people, violent criminals and people who are a threat to us, were taken out of that bill. They don't apply under that bill. But people in our community who have guns stolen from their homes, who are victims of domestic violence, will now feel safe being in partnership with the police and not afraid of our police. And that's really important. That keeps us safer. And so I believe in it both from a values proposition, but also because it makes our community stronger, in the same way we were talking earlier about being in relationship with our police officers. Thank you.
Thank you. So I support immigration. I mean, let's face it, all of us at some time are descendants of immigrants. My husband happens to be second generation Norwegian with a little bit of the unusual last name. You know, Pleasanton is I think a safe city, and what I mean by that is if you commit a serious crime, it doesn't matter if you're a citizen, an immigrant, an undocumented, you should be arrested. If you are stopped because you have a tail light out, I mean, really, you know, we need to just get it fixed and not be rounding people up and separating people from their husbands from their wives or from their children or whatever. It's just, that's not who we are as a country. And so, you know, what can you say? It's just unfortunate what's happening in Washington. But here, I think we need to do the right thing and support the people that come here and help and create and make us a better place.
Well, of course, I also support a welcoming immigration policy, but I don't think there's a will to have a sanctuary city in Pleasanton, so that is not something I would support.
I'll echo a lot of what I've heard here on the stage. I love the increase in diversity that we've seen here in Pleasanton. I will be completely honest with you. When I was in high school in the early 80s, there was one African-American guy in my class. His name was Troy. He was a friend of mine. And now, when I go door to door in my neighborhood, I see people of all different cultures, all different colors, and I truly enjoy engaging with all of these people. Our community has grown in a wonderful, wonderful way. And I want to work really hard to make sure that we maintain that. I'm certainly thankful, you know, that we are not a community that sees some of these horrific, horrific acts like ICE raids and things. You know, I'll also be honest with you. Part of the reason I decided to jump in and run for city council is because I'm really sickened by a lot of what I see in the current administration. I haven't said that publicly, but I think that if you are really outraged by what you are seeing on the national stage and a lot of the divisiveness that you see, this is one great way that you can take a step. You can run for city council, and you can make sure that what is happening in your community reflects your community's values.
Oh, I wanted to ask you, I know we're over our time. We can either go to our closing statements right now, or is it possible to ask one question? Are you guys okay with that? You guys okay with that? Okay, I'm sorry. So we have seen an increase in hate incidences against against many communities, whether it be the African American community, the Latino community, the LGBTQ community, but also the Muslim community. I know a couple of years ago there was some graffiti that happened outside the mosque, and so we've been very concerned about that. We've also seen like increases in school bullying. We've seen, because our office, we provide free legal services to people experiencing any discrimination, hate crime, school bullying. So we've seen an increase in cases. So what would you do in your role in order to help mitigate that, help alleviate that, and to make our societies a more inclusive society? It would be you.
I think it's come back around to me, so thank you. And do appreciate the question. Also, just want to clarify because I think it was unintentional. I also was very vocally opposed to the separation of families at our border or anywhere else, both in my vote as well as my voice on the assembly floor and where I was in our community. I think it was just unintentional. And it might have been blurry from some of the responses. And I do want to say it is with both my voice and my presence in the community that I not only stand up against what I find disgusting and divisive at the national level, but what we can be doing proactively in our community. So, for example, it is standing shoulder to shoulder with those who are under attack. Regardless of what their political party might be or where they may come from or what their faith tradition is, standing shoulder to shoulder in presence. I've been at every single one of those events throughout our community, and proudly so. And speaking very vocally on the assembly floor against the travel ban, against the equivocation of the president on the Charlottesville a rally that was happening, to speak truth about that and to stand up for what we believe. That is so important. And this is from someone who's in the same party. It may be very easy when you're in a different party to throw stones at someone and tell them how wrong you are. You absolutely have to stand up regardless of your party lines for what you think is correct. I am proud to have done that. Received the Contra Costa Interfaith Council's award last year for bringing different faith cultures together and understanding to prevent that type of hatred. And I look forward to continuing to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that since 2016, we've seen a legitimization of hatred, right? That's led to an increase in this, in speech and actions and bullying that is absolutely wrong and against the fabric of our communities and our country. And so it is so important that at every level we are standing up against it. And starting, the day I stood at the airport and coordinated the legal response to today, I believe we have to do everything in our power to fight it. My family has been down this path and way too far down it. And there's no way that I'm going to sit by while we even look like we're going that direction. And so, I joined, 2 years ago, I joined my school board's wellness committee that focuses on bullying to make sure we have programs in our community that are teaching diversity and teaching kids how to learn to be inclusive and ensure that we aren't going down a path where people don't understand the other or treating them wrongly, and making sure that we take that to the state level, that every school is working to ensure there isn't bullying and there's not hate crimes, and that we are an inclusive community that respects all people, and that it's all people that make us stronger. So it's not just saying don't do that, but also showing, standing up, and emphasizing why us being a diverse society makes us stronger.
Thank you. Well, I believe that in Pleasanton, the anti-bullying and the inclusionary starts at the government, and making our government, including our police and fire, look like our community. And quite frankly, I think under the mayor and this council, we've taken a huge step that way. We have more to do, but it's certainly, we're much closer at this point than we were 4 years ago. I don't know if you're aware, but Wednesday the City Council has proclaimed that day as Unity Day to promote kindness, in spirit of October being proclaimed by the City Council of Anti-Bullying Month. There will be a number of programs and things going on in the school district, which the city is supporting. I'm very proud of that. It's one small thing that we can do. Hopefully many of you are aware that during the year we have a number of programs that we do in conjunction with the school district, promoting diversity and also relationships, and trying to get at this whole bullying question and make it, help people to understand and eliminate it. This city has been supporting Cricket for Cubs. It's thing that we can do to help a segment of the population belong, and it's something I'm actually very proud of. I've been attending their fundraisers and stuff, and I really think it's good. I guess I have to stop. There's more.
I agree that standing together is what makes a difference. But I think where the unity begins is in our neighborhoods and being connected with your neighbors. And I know we've got some new families in our neighborhood that have everyone has taken the opportunity to go and visit and connect, and I think that those kinds of connections go a long way, and for the kids to see the families connecting and respecting one another and welcoming one another. And I think that what you all have done with your community, I know that while I was here a couple years ago, I've seen a couple of other outreach where you've welcomed the community to come and to connect with you, and I think that's so valuable. I hear our community members talking about it and appreciating it, and so I think really it comes down to us and our families being friends, and I think that Pleasanton does a pretty good job of being welcoming. I hope that you felt that way.
I'll be somewhat brief because I could talk about this for quite a long time. The fact is, it's just never okay. It's not the Pleasanton that I was raised in. Bullying, divisiveness, racial intolerance, it's just not okay. And what I see in the world, quite frankly, is a normalization of some behaviors that are simply not acceptable. So to whatever extent that I, as a city council member, could make sure that people understand every incident of that is simply not okay. Every incident of graffiti, every incident of bullying, every time a mosque or a church is in some way attacked, it is never, ever once okay. And it must be addressed and responded to immediately. Because as it becomes normalized, it's just an erosion of what I believe makes Pleasanton a wonderful community. So I would absolutely take a zero tolerance policy to it.
So as you've heard from everyone else, I support that. I, too, take a zero tolerance approach. First, I think that we address it by bringing awareness to it. And that awareness can start from the library. It can be brought into our schools. We need to bring awareness to hate crimes everywhere in our town. But this needs to be extrapolated into our entire country, really, especially as we've seen the increase in events throughout our country. Next is bringing education. That, again, that education can be brought through our libraries, with bringing awareness and education to the Muslim and Islamic community, and bringing awareness to our community and forward. We need to combat the negative narratives, the false narratives about Islam and about the Muslim community. And that's the problem, is that people sit there and believe false narratives, and that's what I think brings on some of this hate incidents. I personally sit on a special task force that is assigned to hate incidents. I work in Berkeley. It's a little different community, but I have investigated. I have sat there and talked to people that have been victimized personally, so I can understand the ramifications that people experience when they're victimized. And as a city council member, I'll have zero tolerance for that, and I'll support our police department in that fight.
All right, so we've come to our last segment, which is the closing statements. Before we go ahead and do that, I just wanted to remind you again, if there isn't a voter guide on your chair, you're welcome to grab one from the table. Please make sure to fill out the voter pledge cards. Again, it shows our elected officials how many people in the Muslim community are intending to vote, and it shows our political power. One thing I did not mention, and I would ask you that if you are a parent, could you please also pick up a card. It's what we do is that we actually take a survey of students across California asking what their experiences are in the schools, and that helps us to put together our school bullying report. We found that 53% of all students have said that they experienced some form of bullying rooted in Islamophobia. And so we are going to be doing an updated report. So I please ask you, if you're a parent or if you know children, to please take that card is at the table. It just takes 10 minutes or less than 10 minutes to fill out that survey, and that would really help. So without further ado, well, let's go ahead with the closing statements. 1 minute, please.
Should it go down?
Okay. Thank you all so much for being here and for listening. I loved what Joe said about if you feel like things aren't going right in our country right now, we need to start at the local level. And so I'm glad we're all here engaging in local politics and thinking about who we want to represent us. And so I hope you'll all vote. And so I am just so happy to be here and be, getting to know the community better and better and working to represent you. I'm proud to be endorsed by some wonderful organizations that represent my values, the Sierra Club, California League of Conservation Voters, Planned Parenthood, local electeds, and others who really show that I am going to stand up and represent our values and work to make this community the one that we're proud of, and then one in this point in history is really standing up for what all of us believe and what we need to represent our values. And so I hope I can count on your support. I want to again thank all of you for being here, CAIR for putting this together, for your wonderful moderation. And if you have more questions, I know 1 minute's not a lot of time to answer these really big questions, please reach out. You can find me at RebeccaForAssembly.com, my phone number, my email, and I'm happy to answer any more questions after today. So thank you so much. We'll do assembly and then we'll
That's good. Thank you, Sameena, and thank you again for the invitation to be here today. Great panel, great questions. And I'm sure there were many more, and we went into a very topical amount. So please visit bakerforassembly.com. You'll find on that website not superficial statements like I like education and transportation. You're going to find real issues, details in the vote record to back it up. You'll also find that instead of Sacramento interest and organizations, that you'll see local leaders from every single school board, city council, and political party endorsing my campaign, and I'm very proud of that. I believe that's how we get more done. That's the type of service we should have. I'm very proud to have the endorsement of every newspaper in our district who independently looks at the candidates and their records and what they believe in. That's the East Bay Times, the Pleasanton Weekly, the Independent, and even the San Francisco Chronicle. And a couple of copies of those editorials are over on the site. I invite you to visit that and check it out. And most importantly, do vote in every election, not just what seems like the big elections, but when dog catcher's on the ballot, be sure to vote. And look for someone truly who has an independent record, independent from the special interests in Sacramento, from their own political party, and who has a bipartisan record. That's what we need more of in this country. I'm proud to be the only candidate with that record. Thank you.
Well, thank you for taking time this Sunday afternoon. I know there's lots of things you could be doing. I'd like to sum up by simply saying that experience matters. I've had 2 decades worth of serving on numerous committees, commissions, task forces, both locally and regionally. I've enjoyed a wide support of the cross-section of the community. I believe that it's absolutely essential to be able to work with everyone in the community. I've received endorsements from our police and firefighters, all 5 of our Pleasanton School Board trustees, all 5 mayors of the Tri-Valley, Assemblywoman Baker, State Senator Glazier, our Pleasanton Chamber of Commerce backpack, the Pleasanton Weekly, and the East Bay Times, just to name a few. I hope I can count on your vote as your council member for the next 4 years. I think my record of service demonstrates that I'm deeply committed to our community, and I want to continue to make our city a better place to live. And for more information, you can visit Narum.com. There's lots of more information and specifics on a number of the topics we've talked about here, as well as many others that are just as important. Thank you.
I'm also endorsed by past mayors and current and past city council members. The independent newspaper said vote only 1 city council member, and that was me. PleasantonVoters.com is a grassroots organization of Pleasanton residents who have wanted to be informed and involved, and I received their top endorsement. What's lovely about our city council and local politics is it is nonpartisan. So we really do work together more. There's less divisiveness. So I will say that I feel that my campaign reflects the top priority of our Pleasanton community, which the 2017 City of Pleasanton survey identified the top concern of Pleasanton residents is excessive growth and the negative impacts accompanying it. I support slow and smart growth, and I feel that that reflects the will of the community.
Thank you again so much for welcoming us and for coming out today to listen to us. We greatly appreciate your engagement. When you're thinking about casting your vote today, especially when you're considering who should fill that open seat on the City Council, I'll ask you to keep two things in mind. The first is experience. Being on the City Council is not an entry-level job. It's a job that actually requires somebody who knows how to get things done in the city. And I'm proud to say that I've delivered a lot for this city in my 12 years of service on Park and Rec and Bike, Pedestrian, and Trails. That type of experience matters. The second thing I'll say is look for a candidate who has an open mind, a candidate who doesn't have a deep-seated agenda or rigid mindset. Look for a candidate who will listen to all stakeholders in the community, not just those who shout the loudest. And also look for a candidate who views the challenges that we face in our community as opportunities, not threats. Pleasanton is the best place to live in the Bay Area, and I will work extremely hard to keep it that way. Thank you.
All right. Assalamu alaikum. So I'd like to thank everyone again for coming out. Thank CAIR, thank the MCC community. I'd also like to special thanks to Huda, who's my campaign manager and has helped guide me through this. We've had some great conversations talking about some of our visits to Qatar and some other Muslim communities in the last couple of years. I think it's important that we look forward to our future community and making sure that we promote inclusiveness, and I think that's something that I bring to the table. We earlier were talking about diversity, and diversity is good in our community, and we support that. We want diversity in our housing. We want diversity in our community, our schools. I think it's important that we have diversity on our city council. Currently, it's completely represented by people from the private sector and no one from public sector. And I think that I bring a unique perspective to the table that could represent that, especially as we go forward and we look into our future plans for the community. I think I'm your person for Pleasanton City Council, as I most closely associate with your tremendous value on education. I went and I sought my master's degree because I put a great value on education. And I think that we need to continue to advocate for that in our community going forward. And so I understand how important that is and how valuable that is to this community. I've been the stop sign, so any other questions, please come see me up afterwards. Thank you, guys.
I want to thank you very much to the candidates who have come today. And also I want to thank you for your patience for staying a little bit extra for all of you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much to the MCC for providing the space and also for the live stream. So if you can please, I don't know when it's going to be available online. Well, I guess it's live, so obviously it's now. Hello. So if you could potentially share that with folks, with your neighbors and friends as well, so we can make sure we get the reach out of the candidates. So again, thank you very much, and please make sure to get me those pledge cards.